right, this is Sports for Real with Coach Hall, coming at you with this odd afternoon broadcast. Not expecting a whole lot of people to be on. Most people are at work. Other people getting ready for cookouts. Then if you're like me, you're waiting for tonight's game when TCU gets it on with Bill Belichick in his North Carolina debut. What will we see from Belichick? Well, it should be interesting. Based on what we've seen this weekend, it should really be interesting because we've seen some things that a little bit unexpected and some cause for alarm and then some that were expected. So let's start out with a little recap from what I saw. The most anticipated matchup to me was Texas and Ohio State. Everybody's talking about Arch Manning. He's going to be this, he's going to be great, and he's going to win Heisman, he's going to do this, and he's going to do that. I've been hearing this crap ever since he walked onto Austin's campus. He played 2 years behind yours, and last year when they get to the playoffs, they tell me, after losing to Ohio State, that if Arch Manning had played, then Texas would have beat Ohio State. Based on a little bit I had seen of Manning, you can't prove to me that this guy here deserved to have been a starting quarterback, and especially he would have made that much of a difference against Ohio State in the playoffs. So, yours ended up losing the game. Ohio State, won the national championship. But just so happened, these two were scheduled to play to open the season this year. So Manning was going to get his shot. Even though yours could have came back to college, he wasn't going to have the support because the echoes in the background was that Manning was just so strong, that he was so powerful, that yours, he just had to get out of the way. Even if he didn't go to the pros, he had to go somewhere else because he couldn't play in Texas no more because they had to play this guy. He was just that good. But I'm thinking to myself, I hadn't seen any of that. And like everybody else, I'm waiting to see it. So lo and behold, right out of the gate, who he gets Ohio State. And we get to see just how great this guy Manning is. I've been hearing it. They're talking about him winning the Heisman Trophy. And then I'm got in my back of my mind, he's going to have to show it to me because I'm looking at it from a coaching standpoint. He ain't showed it to me. I don't give a damn who he's related to. And if you start talking about the Mannings, the only true Hall of Famer in the Manning family is Peyton. Archie was lovable Archie, playing on a losing team. Everybody was crazy about him. He had the popularity to get to the Hall of Fame. Eli's probably going to get there because of the 2 Super Bowl upsets he got over Brady. Fine. So now this guy comes along, he's supposed to be the next one down the line to do something, right? Well, the first play, he comes out, they do a play action with the back, and he promptly throws the ball in the dirt. I could make that throw now, and I'm 3 times older than this guy. Are you kidding me? You talking about a Heisman Trophy winner? And the game just got worse from that point. Now, he did throw 2 good passes. One along the sideline leading up to that touchdown he did throw later on. That was a great throw. But that safety was right there. Defenders now, especially in college with this targeting call, you got to be careful how you make contact with a receiver because you might get thrown out of the game. This guy was in perfect position to put a shoulder on the ball and knock it away. But it seemed like to me he let the guy catch the ball and then tried to hit him. Well, it was too late then. The guy had already gathered the ball. But I understand what his limitations are. But if that had been an old school safety, it would have ran right through that receiver and jarred that ball loose. But that's the state of the game that we play today. But still, it was a great throw. And he made another great throw in the end zone. But other than that, Manning, just like he did last year, he hadn't shown me a thing, man. And I'm still waiting for him to show me something. Now, I don't know who they play next, but I know they're going to play a couple weak sisters of the poor. And he's going to come out, he's going to look great. He's going to have great opportunities to run the ball. He's going to make some good throws, and they're going to say, this guy here is great. Well, it's good or easier to look great when you are a 12th grader and you're playing against 8th graders. if you got that much disparity in age and talent, then you're supposed to look good. That is about the same comparison that you're going to get when you say you have a top team like Texas play against a Division 1AA team or FCS team, if you want to call it now. It's a big disparity in talent, and you're going to look a whole lot better playing against somebody on a different level than you would as somebody that's looking you right in your eyes, like Ohio State did. Now, in reality, I thought that once I had found out that Patricia was the defensive coordinator a couple of weeks before that game, I figured that he was going to have some kind of way to confuse the young fella, and I think they did a lot of that. There was not a whole lot of room down the field to throw the ball just by the way that they were playing them. So what you're going to see from Texas going forward, teams are going to play them just that way. They're going to play that same kind of defense. And what Texas is going to have to do, they're going to have to run the ball to get them out of that. And if they can't run the ball well enough to get them out of that, then Texas is going to struggle, even though they do have that great defense. But they'll be back, and they're going to cause problems in the SEC just like they did last year. They didn't win it. Georgia stole 2 games from them last year, so it's going to be the same kind of struggle this year for Texas. But they're going to be a problem for whoever they face. And the other game, I saw later that night, I saw LSU finally win an opening game. Brian Kelly, a lot of fans down there don't like Brian Kelly for whatever reason, I guess because he's a Northerner. And he hadn't won any opening games in the last couple of years. So in some people's eyes, Kelly is on the hot seat. But they managed to go into Clemson and ended up knocking them off with a great defensive performance. Clemson was supposed to be in the top 5. I don't see them being a top 5 team. This guy Klubnik seems like he's been hanging around for about 10 years. You think he would be farther along than what he is, but when he faces stiff competition, Klubnik don't look so good. So I don't know if that's a byproduct of just playing against LSU, or is that a byproduct of Dabo Swinney not going into the transfer portal and embracing it like everybody else. He doesn't really have any other options but to go with Klubnik. And if Klubnik goes down, I don't know what Clemson is going to do. It's going to be a tough road for him to hold. And that'll be interesting to see how that unfolds. But one thing that always puzzled me, and I believe that you got some administrators that bounce from one campus to the other. How is it that both schools call themselves Death Valley? Their stadium's Death Valley. I always try to figure it out. They got the same mascot, same region of the country. There's got to be some kind of related history there for both those two to embrace the same kind of thought process. And I don't know who was first to name it Death Valley, but LSU is the most famous of the Death Valley. But they both call themselves Death Valley. And if you listen to the songs that they play in the band, they're also related. So I'm thinking whoever set up the tradition there at Clemson also has some relation to the guy that did it at LSU, if in fact it's not the same person. But I'm going to research that and find that out myself. But I always wondered about that since I was a kid. And even though these two teams played before, it's always been in the bowl game. Never do I recall LSU going into Clemson or vice versa. But they get a chance to repay the favor next year. And that is the byproduct of all this new playoff stuff and these big conferences. These schools now have to play somebody in the power conferences other than their own conference schedule. And I think that's great because in the BCS era, you never would have got that. And, I'm big over here and you big over there. And as long as we don't have to play, I can always say I'm number 1 because I know 9 times out of 10 I'm not going to run into you. But the downside of it is, take Nebraska for instance. Nebraska was this power in their area. It was Nebraska and Oklahoma. And you knew that one of those two teams was going to win that Big 8 conference and go to a bowl game. Well, now that you got these big conferences and they're in bigger areas, now they're not winning like they used to. The fan bases want that, but they can't win because you're in there with other programs that have these tremendous track records of winning. So what you used to before is going to start decreasing. And I think if enough of these so-called powerhouses start to decrease and don't see the wins that they have seen throughout their histories, then they're going to go back to the same setup they had before because they're safer that way. I'd rather talk how bad I am than have to prove how bad I am. and that's the way that college football has always been set up, and it's eventually going to go back to that. Now, Florida State, nobody knew what Florida State was going to have. They had to rebuild and get up off the floor from what happened to them over the last year and a half in football. They lost their quarterback, and they couldn't win the conference, and they won the ACC, but they couldn't get a bowl invite because the committee felt like they wouldn't be able to compete, which they were correct because they didn't have a backup quarterback. All the guys opt out, they get blown out by Georgia, and then they have that bad year. They didn't select good players from the portal. Ugielele, or whatever his name was, he was horrible, and all he was worried about was his money, and it started to look bad for Norvell. But they had to go back and do it again, and this time they got Castellanos out of Boston College, and turned out he was a great pickup. Castellanos is one of those players where you can have him, but he's so quick on his movements and transfer of positioning that he can be hard to deal with. And if you get a guy like that in the open field, I don't care who he's playing against, he's going to cause a problem. I saw him running around and escaping when he was at Boston College. So it's not a surprise to me that he's going to be able to do that when he comes over to Florida State. But the real pickup jewel that Florida State has is not Castellanos, even though he's dangerous, not those couple guys they got out of Alabama that contributed against Alabama, but Gus Malzahn is the biggest pickup that Florida State got. Here, this guy was the head coach at Central Florida. For whatever reason, he pulls a Chip Kelly. He resigns his head coach position to go back to being offensive coordinator. Maybe he just rather call plays and deal with all the other crap that's going on with this NIL and all that. He just want to coach football. And I can understand that. But he's probably going to get fired anyway at UCF. He had another subpar season. So it turned out to be a great move. But this guy's an offensive genius. Plus, he's playing against Alabama in his first game. What better matchup for a guy like Malzahn than to go against Alabama? He's an Auburn guy at heart. He's beaten Alabama before. He knows how to play against teams like this. So when you add all this together, even though Alabama was a 13-point favorite, they were in trouble before the schedule came out. Why? Because they didn't know what to expect from Florida State. And then they would have the guy Castellano defended, but then that quickness that he had was able him to escape. And Gus Malzahn calling those plays, Alabama was in trouble. So when you break in a quarterback at Alabama, what's his name, Simpson, he wasn't bad. He made some good throws. He made some good plays. It's just that Florida State was just a half a step better than they were that particular day. But should I be concerned about Alabama? Not really. Like I said, in college, you don't really have film. You don't know what to expect when you go in there because you have nothing to go on. This particular team, you might be able to look at these players, how they fared at other teams, but unless you have it on film what this team is going to do to you, it's like a shot in the dark. And Florida State had all the hitting advantages. Now, if they were to play Alabama again this week, I think you would have a completely different ball game. But be that as it may, Alabama fans are concerned. And, of course, anytime they lose a game, it's the world is ending kind of thing. But they got Louisiana Monroe, who snuck up on them before, but with the great Nick Saban, by the way. And that's not going to happen. They're going to be quicker than Wisconsin. And when they go into Georgia on the 27th, they should be 2-1. And they know they can match up with Georgia. So I think Alabama is going to be fine. But if you poll the average Alabama fan, they're going to tell you, get rid of DeBoer. Not because they lost 3 games last year. Not necessarily because they lost to Florida State this year. DeBoer he's not local. He's from North Dakota somewhere, and he came from the University of Washington. So the first thing the fans are going to point to that this guy, he's not SEC. He's from somewhere else. He don't know how we play down here, and they want to use that as a scapegoat to jettison this guy out of town. But DeBoer is a good coach. He's going to be fine. He just don't have the rhythm yet, and a lot of times it takes rhythm to get going. And the problem with him is no matter what he does, he's going to be scrutinized because he's not Nick Saban. The worst thing to do is to follow a legend. And that is the biggest problem that DeBoer has. Now, if he goes on and win these 2 games and go into Georgia and knock them off, which they've done before, then everything will be just fine in Tuscaloosa. But right now, most people right on the fence about whether or not that DeBoer should be fired. And that's what the poll I'm getting right now, 50-50. Should DeBoer be fired? I don't think so. But a lot of Alabama fans will say otherwise. All they're doing is looking down the schedule and say, well, if you can't stop this run, how are you going to stop Georgia? Well, I think Alabama's going to be fine. If you look at the way they started the game, they jammed it right down Florida State throat. But like I say, the star of that game was Gus Malzahn. And then a quick guy like Castellanos, it don't make a difference who they play. He's going to run around and jitterbug and make some plays. The only way to stop a guy like Castellanos is to put a hat on him and knock him out of the game, or at least hit him hard enough to make him think twice about running up in there the next time. That's the only way you're going to stop a guy like Castellanos, and that's just the way it is. But Alabama, I think, is going to be fine. And DeBoer, you had to expect this. Some people had him fired before he even played the game. Already taking bets on how long he's going to last. But I think it would be a mistake to fire this guy right now. Give him at least 3 years to see what he does. And they've even got to the point now where they're talking about replacements. 2 of the replacements, John Gruden is one, and I forget who the other guy they said. I don't know. But I think if you want to hire DeBoer, you should have went over to Georgia and got Kirby Smart. So I think that's Alabama's going to be okay with that. Sir Go Banner, whatever that means, laugh out loud. That ran all over y'all ass. Well, it's not my team. I'm talking in general. I watch all the games, and I just want to see some good football. And just like tonight, I think Belichick's going to show you a little bit that he's going to be a problem in the SEC, if nothing else, but coming up with some kind of defensive game plan to slow you down. Matt Patricia did a great job at Ohio State, and some people are going to use that as an excuse as to why he lost. Why Arch Manning lost was because of Patricia. But I just think Arch Manning, he don't seem to be as good to me what people are making him out to be. And for him to come out and immediately skip the ball on the first pass he threw, man, that is terrible. I mean, an old guy like me, I could have picked it up and then and throw it out. And that would have been great. All right. I got some idiot on here. So I know how to get him out the way. I won't respond to that. You can read it if you want. I could care less. But whoever you are, Mr. Burns, you can go to hell. How about that? But the point is, Alabama is going to be okay. And I was talking about Ohio State. But yes, Matt Patricia, he's a great defense coordinator, and he did a great job against Texas. But I just think Arch Manning is just not the Arch Manning is just not like what people think that he is. So, and I think that time is going to prove what I'm saying to you is going to be true. So watch and see just what this guy does. All right. All right. So only time to take care of that. All right, so what do you guys think about DeBoer? I see that the vote's about 50-50 here, and they think that a lot of people that I talk to, all the Alabama fans I know, they had already said before that they don't think that DeBoer is a good fit for Alabama, and I disagree with that. I think the guy can coach. Anybody can be a good coach. You just got to give him a shot. But by him starting out the way he's starting, he's already lost, 4 games? I don't know how long it took Saban to lose 4 games, but I know in his first year he did lose about 3 or 4 games. So even though he turned the program around and had the great success, he is still looked at as the yard bearer for standard bearer for Alabama. Well, I'm going to tell you something, and you might not like it, and you can tell the way that Saban has conducted himself dealing with this NIL stuff, the way he feels about it. What Alabama has been doing all along at this point is the same thing that everybody's allowed to do now. So you've been paying players and sliding money under the whole, giving it to players, and that is your way of getting players to come. That is no different than what the other teams can do now legally or above board. And now you're on a more equal playing field like everybody else. So if you've been paying players all along, and now everybody else is allowed to do it, your advantage has gone away. And the players using this as leverage to bounce around from program to program, and now your program starts to reduce. So even if Nick Saban was there, he'd be dealing with the same thing that DeBoer is dealing with. Alabama can't outpay everybody on the board like they've been doing. You got schools like Texas A&M and Texas Tech. They got long pockets too. But now they can come on out and compete with you openly without you telling some kid under the table. It makes a big difference. So I'm using Alabama as the face of that. They may not be the face of that because they might not be at the top of that chain. But all those NCAA programs found ways to compete with other schools, and you cannot tell me, I don't care who you are, that all these players, some of these players haven't been getting paid under the table for years. But now that the NIL is out there and then the players are allowed to skip and jump how they want to, now Alabama can't be a leader at that because I'm going to outbid you if I find out what you offering from Alabama. And it's perfectly legal right now. This is why the SEC, they want to run to Washington, D.C. and try to make changes to that and get control of this because the institutions are not in control anymore. And a lot of people can't deal with that. So whether it's DeBoer or Saban, you can bring back Bear Bryant, it wouldn't make no difference. Alabama's going to struggle. They're going to be up and down just like the rest of these schools. So unless you got the biggest pockets and you telling everybody you got the biggest pockets, and then you're going to be subject to losing a lot of players just like all the rest of these teams. So you can fire DeBoer, and it'll be something completely different. All right, Nate Lowe. All right, here's a point that I've been looking for. This is about discipline, though. Bama is the only school paying to play, and LA is the Wild West, which is the point I just made. Nate, that's a great point, but you brought the discipline point. I was waiting for somebody to say that to me. They say that DeBoer doesn't have the same discipline aspect that Saban has. I probably would agree with that. But DeBoer is known as a tough disciplinarian too. But how much can you discipline a guy if he's making millions? I heard George Foreman say it's hard to tell a guy what to do if he's got $1 million. Well, a lot of these guys are making $1 million playing football. So if you disrespect me or treat me in a kind of way, guess what? The season over with, I'm going to leave. Now, the only thing that hasn't stopped college football from collapsing completely is that it's different from the NFL where you have a trade and you can get rid of players in the middle of the year. But if some player decides he wants to transfer at the middle of the season because things aren't quite going right, and then the rules allow him to play somewhere else at the middle of the season, then it becomes completely lawless. Because I might not have got the ball. Let's take the guy Jeremiah Smith for Ohio State, the first drive that they had. They got him isolated one-on-one, but the quarterback went somewhere else. He had the guy on the skinny post for a touchdown. There was no safety back there, but he didn't throw. So he's jumping up and down, having a fit. Let's just say this guy decides I don't want to play for this team anymore because I was wide open and he didn't throw me the ball. Never mind, he dropped 2 or 3 passes during that first half. That don't count. But when I was wide open, you didn't throw me the ball. And this is the way these guys think. He was open on a slant. They didn't throw it to him. What's to say this guy Smith comes around and say, I don't want to play for this team anymore because he's going to throw it to me when they needed to the most. And what you're going to have is a bunch of players starting to transfer in the middle of the season, and then all the coaches are going to lose complete control because now the players control everything. So what can you do about that? Somebody answer that question for me. I know it sounds far-fetched, but it ain't that far-fetched. It was far-fetched to have these teams trading teams like the way they do. I've seen guys from University of Florida go play for Georgia, or Florida go up to Florida State. Since when that happened? You're supposed to be hated rivals. Well, the only people that's hating are the ones in the stands. The players, they don't give a damn because they're getting paid. As soon as you introduce that money into the play, then everything changed just like that. So I like to see what will happen when some player tries to challenge. I should be able to transfer in the middle of the season. And, once you sign your scholarship contract, you were supposed to be stuck for X amount of time. But even that went out the window. It's like my college coach told us, shit, your scholarship is for 1 year renewal. So if it's 1 year renewal, then why can I tear up that contract in the middle of the season? It's a novel question to ask. But whatever the case, I know DeBoer, he's not as rough on him from what I've seen from Saban. Saban was running a psychology game is what he was doing. He found out how all these guys thought, and he knew which buttons to push. He might be want to yell at the superstar player, but the superstar player didn't have the psychology for you to yell at him like that. He might fall apart. So what he do, he pick on some other player that he knew he can yell at and say what he want to say to the other guy in earshot. So everybody gets the message, but he's yelling at the guy that would take it. And that's pretty smart. But you really have to know your players to be able to get away with that kind of stuff. Jimmy Johnson was another guy